Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our first Generational Wealth with Yvette Butler, sponsored by Hive Wealth. We're here today to engage in a conversation about building wealth across communities. My name is Ken Michael, and I'll be moderating this event. Please allow me to introduce our host, Hive Wealth's CEO and founder, Yvette Butler.
Good afternoon. Good morning.
Hey, so good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Ken.
Awesome. So let me introduce our guest, Black Tech Nation's VC, Kalani Jasmine. Hey, Kalani.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
You can hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Great. I can't not hear you guys for some reason. And to the audience, I promise we practiced this and had everything set up, and now my audio is completely done. So
Beautiful.
if you can give me a second and continue on without me, I'm just going to try to figure out what's going on with the sound.
Absolutely, absolutely. We got you. You know, these are how these things happen these days with so much technology running all at once. We just roll with the punches. So anyway, Yvette, let's get started. But before we get started, I just want everyone listening to know that we're going to have a Q&A session at the end that we would love for you to participate in. So as you follow along our journey here, start thinking of some burning questions that you might like to ask, and be ready to drop them in the chat. And so as we chat, feel free to add your comments below, and we'll check them out and answer them as we can. All right, so let's get started. So Yvette, tell us about your personal history and your understanding of generational wealth.
It's absolutely my favorite question in the world. So thank you for that. And I will say that my family story is really a classic African American story. So it really starts out about the power of education, the power of hard work, the power of family, the power of survival and overcoming. And that's a story that is so important to all of us and to me personally. But we want to talk today, and our journey is really about wealth creation. And unfortunately, the classic African American story is often about wealth destruction. So let me tell you a little bit about my family. My grandparents were loves of my life, but also lived outside of Waco, about 20 miles in a small town called Valley Mills, Texas. And they were the first entrepreneurs that I ever had any exposure to. So again, it's a classic story. It literally is a small town with the train tracks coming through it, and the black side of town and the white side of town. And they had a gas station and a mechanics facility on the black side of town. And they also scraped together and worked really hard and bought about 100 acres of land on another part of town where they did cattle ranching. So my grandfather, actually's family, owned 500 acres of land when he was growing up. And eminent domain came through. Again, this is a classic story. And they built a dam over those 500 acres. So those 500 acres, if you're conservative, would be worth, let's say, $10,000 an acre. That would have been $5 million. So just imagine, and this is really the heart of what we're trying to teach people and change, is that isn't just a one-time loss. That is wealth that's lost for generations. And we're going to talk today and begin the dialogue around how we change that and what the impact is. As you know, this story sounds very familiar, and many of you have had similar experiences. So my dad and his siblings recently sold those 100 acres, and it was just for a fraction of that $5 million, and not enough wealth to pass on. As you can see, too, given that Tulsa has been in the news so much, yesterday some of the survivors got approval to have their lawsuit continue, which is great. But conservative estimates say that that community, Greenwood community, lost $200 million. And then finally, we want to understand that, again, it's not just a one-time event, that continues to cycle through generations. And today, not 100 years ago, but today, the average African-American homeowner has $200,000 less equity in their home. So that is the wealth destruction story that we want to turn into a wealth building story.
Absolutely. It's heartbreaking. But to be able to have an awareness of what this is, we have a chance to actually address it and to start fixing it. What do you think is the relationship between technology and these wealth gaps?
Well, unfortunately, right now, that it is just exacerbating the direction that we're going. So let's start with the good news. The wonderful thing, I've spent over 30 years at that intersection of wealth management and technology. And the thing I love about technology, my first kind of trading platform that I joined was Charles Schwab in the 90s. And what's so great about all those platforms, the E-Trades, et cetera, is that it makes Robinhood, for those of you who are millennials, it makes trading and banking and wealth creation more accessible, which is the good news. And we have to be confident enough to take advantage of that. The reason I say that right now it's exacerbating those differences across the wealth gaps across generation, gender, and race is that we are not participating in the innovation economy enough. Where you have to have a diversified portfolio that's mainly passive. Those of you who've heard me speak before, I'm very passionate about don't overpay to underperform. And that's where the bulk of your portfolio should be. But a good 10 to 15% should be in technology, in private companies, whether it's in health science, whether it's wherever innovation is, because on that passive, diversified core public security portfolio, which we all need. I don't want anyone to think I don't believe in it, because I've spent a whole career helping you build those, and I will continue to do those. And yes, you can absolutely retire on that. But if you want to create real wealth, generational wealth, you also have to participate in the innovation economy.
Yeah, I mean, so do you feel like that the tech that currently exists has made it easy, or less difficult, more difficult? There's more access, there's more opportunities, but overall, in terms of a trend, do you think it's easier to close that wealth gap with the current technology?
I am really encouraged around how diverse the participation on a lot of these emerging topics. People are very interested in trading. Folks are super interested in crypto, and all of that is great. But just like you have to diversify in your core portfolio, if you're going to invest in technology, you've got to diversify there. And again, it's all about not putting all your eggs in one basket and really getting educated on what you're investing in. That old Warren Buffett thought still holds true. Please invest in things that you know. So if you really understand what you're trading in crypto or what you're buying, fantastic. If you don't, rely on your hive, whether that's an investment club, whether you have friends in the industry, get educated. And always, when you're making investments in technology in particular, make sure you're really buying something you understand.
Makes sense. Now, let's talk about that aspect from a racial and gender and generational standpoint, right? In terms of the tech with those silos.
Yes. Well, there's so many different things. Let's talk about gender for a minute. One thing that I think is so true and so exciting is that women actually have a lot of the inherent capability to be better investors, and generally are. So think about some of the themes that are so important to be a successful investor. You have to invest for the long term. You have to be patient. You have to keep an eye on expenses. You have to make sure that you're well diversified. And you have to have sound financial planning in place. You have to plan for the future. And all of that is the essence of great investing. I think the biggest issue across all of those wealth gaps is confidence and access to information. I love the Maya Angelou quote, and it really was the quote that inspired me to start Hive Wealth. And that is, if you know better, you do better. And I've been at the tables where money secrets have been told for all of these years. And it really is about starting a movement where we're talking about money, we're talking about wealth creation, and we understand how important it is to get educated, to believe in yourself, to find the right help, and to take positive steps forward.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. You speak about women, right? Let's kind of shift to, just kind of reiterating why you believe that people should care about building generational wealth, and specifically for women.
Yes, I think for women in particular, and I think this is true across generations, we have the first time ever in American history where it's not kind of preordained that the last generation or the newest generation is going to do better than the generation in front of it. So we're going the wrong direction there as well. And kind of the morality of generational wealth building. Is it just about collecting more just I talk about this all the time. It seems like money was built with the goal of whoever dies with the most money wins. And there's a whole bunch of us that don't think like that. I don't think women think like that. I think millennials with interest in so many things around the environment and a better world don't think like that. And so money is just a means to an end. And why you want your money to last through the generations is really fundamental. For those of you who are in, customer-oriented businesses, that to make a good business and to make a good decision, you've got to push decision-making close to the customer. Well, think about philanthropy. Most of the people that are receiving the philanthropy look like me, but yet most of the folks who have funded that philanthropy and are deciding how that philanthropy is delivered aren't so close to the customer. So it's really that fundamental element of why generational wealth matters. If a more diverse group of people create the institutions, whether it's school, whether it's homelessness, whether it's education, all of those topics that are so economic empowerment, which is one that is passionate of mine. If you've got a more diverse funding pool, I believe we're going to ultimately get better outcomes, which will lead to a better world.
Yeah, thank you, Yvette. I think we've got Kalani back. So welcome, Kalani. Glad you can
hello.
Out all the tech stuff. Glad to have you.
Hear me? I can hear you.
Can.
All righty. All right. It wouldn't be a tech event without a small tech problem.
That's
absolutely.
Right.
But I think we rolled with it, and glad to have you here. So let's get into it with you. So tell me a little bit of your personal history and your understanding of generational wealth.
Yeah. Sure. So I grew up with my mother and father. My mom was the person who worked a full-time corporate job. And she was very tight with her money, whereas my father, who was an artiste and, just was more like, hey, if you want it, I'm just going to get it for you. So I grew up with really two different ways of managing and thinking about money that kind of conflicted at times, right? And so that even how we think about generational wealth and where our role is in generational wealth, and we think about how we've been impacted by those who were the authority of the money in our households and the messages we were sent at an early age, like all of that matters. And that also relates a lot to some of the things we'll talk about, I'm sure, later. So because of that, I thought of money in various different ways, but never really thought about it as far as like generational wealth until I was really an adult, to be honest. I hadn't even heard of the phrase. And so that wasn't something that was really spoken about in my household or my community in general, or in high school or any other of my, places of education, which is really interesting, like that I would become an adult or a young adult before I really realized the importance of generational wealth. The only way that I really heard about it was this phrase, old money versus new money. But even then I didn't really understand like the significance of what that means. And so, yeah, to me, generational wealth is really, I learned over time, is really more about a system. It's more about a system that allows for a certain power within a system that rewards those with generational wealth and those who have the wealth versus those that don't. And so that creates a lot of systematic things that we all have to contend with.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of the interesting things that you touched on a little bit was just sort of knowledge around finances, and especially that's affected by how we grow up and our parents and their habits with money and finances. And so just even the awareness of generational wealth and being able to build it at such a young age for a lot of us is not even something that we're introduced to. So it's wonderful that we're able to talk about this now. Yvette, any thoughts on that?
No, just to add a little bit to that. I mean, it's because I think societally, and especially in our community, money was considered. We're trying to change it, so I'm going to use was considered shameful or taboo or bragging or boastful. And what it's really doing is blocking education. Because the folks who have money, I can guarantee you, having served them for so long, they talk about it all the time, and their kids are educated and they get them involved. And the generations move on. There was an article, I think it was in the LA Times this week, that said a young writer was writing about his friends. And so these were multiple people who had $2 million trust funds and were living off $500,000 a year on top of that. That is like talking another language in our community. I don't know anyone who is living like that. So there are just a lot of things. The main message for today is the first step is to talk about it. It's not shameful. It's never too late. It's never too late to start planning for your future today.
It's amazing. Yvette and I created original docuseries that actually touches on some of these things, where we take 5 couples and families and team them up with advisors and help them achieve some of their financial goals. But a lot of it is getting through that first bunch of fears about talking about money and getting through the taboo of talking about money. And that's such an empowering thing. Kalani, what's the relationship between technology and wealth gaps, in your opinion?
Well, I believe that technology is both the cause and the cure of the wealth gap. I think it can absolutely push it further apart, but then there's so much opportunity to actually close it, which is a lot of the work that I'm doing on at least the mission side of my goal with the Black Tech Nation Ventures. So for example, I grew up in, a not the greatest suburb of Chicago, and we didn't have the most money. And here I am as a VC. So even my relationship to generational wealth now, in relation to what tech has done for me, just in a short period of time, because I had the opportunity to learn tech, it speaks volumes to the opportunity that it presents to close the gap. However, we also see how fast tech moves. Tech is just a very fast industry that we have to really be careful how we as a society decide to move tech along, especially in terms of money, where it's given, where it's invested, who has access to it. Because of how quickly tech moves, we see how it can be detrimental, I think, in a lot of ways to wealth, people to further the wealth gap. I'll say that.
And Kalani, what you're saying is so important, and we haven't gone as deep in entrepreneurship. How do you choose who you invest in? And what would you say to the entrepreneurs and founders out there with a great idea and thinking about jumping in?
Wow, how do I choose? Do we have an entire hour? So we choose, first and foremost, we choose people who have a passion, who are coachable, who know they don't know everything but have a great idea, and they found a niche in a market that they're like, I am the person to solve this thing, right? And I think that's what we look for first before anything. But then there's like the understanding of your business and how you will grow wealth, right? Revenue, cash flow within that business, because at the end of the day, that's what investment is about. It's about return, creating returns for your LPs, both as an investor, as an LP for a founder, and then also my LPs who are looking for us to create that return as well. And then I would say lastly is someone who knows how to build a great team and be a great team player, even as a leader. Having the right team in place, the right advisors, the right connections to the industries you want to serve, that's very important.
Terrific. So I'm seeing one of the questions or the comments in our comments section. I think it's Sean Phillips. Sorry if I'm getting your name pronouncing it incorrectly. But what are some good methods for us to talk about money and wealth with our kids and grow the conversation? And that leads me into our next conversation about recommendations you can give to people if they have generational wealth and what they should do with it, and how we have that conversation.
So hi, Sean. Good to see you out there in the universe. This, I think, is so important. And there are great apps that are addressing this, like my great friend, Tanya Van Court's Goal Setter app, where it's really around starting early and making sure that kids have a savings account. And I think you can even do investing on the platform at this point. The earlier you get your kind of fingers on the app, the better, because it also starts a conversation. So open a savings account. The kids are never too young, and you can learn together. If you feel like, hey, I'm a little behind in this race, it can be an interactive educational journey together along the way.
I'd like to add to that. I saw a meme recently on social media that said, parents, stop telling your kids they're too young to understand something. We need to be talking about wealth from the very beginning because they're absorbing it. So talk to them like the little mini adults they are, so that as they grow older, they will understand how to move in this society that is completely run by money, to be honest. And we want to make sure our kids are playing in the game just like everyone else is.
Well, and just one more, I'm sorry, Ken, just to add to that a little bit, we talked about the cycle of how housing created so much wealth, and we had redlining issues, and land was taken by eminent domain, on and on and on. So think about how that cycle continues. So then we don't necessarily have a nest egg to send the kids to college. So the kid goes to college and then they're in debt. And if, let's say we did have enough money for that, but then they're ready to start a business and they want to be a founder or start a great idea, we're behind again because we don't have the extra next egg to help them start the business. Nothing has made me more infuriated where I was watching The Dropout. I don't know if everybody was watching it. And at one point she said, I think she was 19 years old, that she raised $6 million from friends and family. Well, most of us do not have friends and family that can rustle up $6 million for us to go follow our dreams. And that's what we have to change. And then it will snowball from there.
That kind of answers Ken's. Go ahead, Ken. I don't know.
You got it, Glenn. You got it.
I was just going to say Ken's question following Sean's question, which was, what do people with generational wealth do then, right? So people like that who have access to even understanding how to raise $6 million at 19. So many young people, teenagers have no idea. They're trying to get $100 for a new outfit or a pair of shoes. You know what I mean? So it's just a completely, especially from where I'm from. And so, you know, I could be funny and say, what should people do with their generational wealth? Honestly, just give it away. I actually have someone who is an investor in our fund that her goal is to just give her wealth away because she understands that she was not the reason they have it, which I think is so admirable. But on the other hand, beyond just giving it away and writing, you know, charitable checks, I think it's really about teaching people and opening up your networks of access to the people who could give opportunities that will ultimately allow for people to build generational wealth. That's what you can do. It's educate.
Yeah, education is key. It's, you know, it's a mindset. Understanding money and finances is a mindset, and even going back to teaching your kids about it, the earlier that they are comfortable with that mindset, they can create and innovate within that mindset and create tools for others. Yvette, let's talk about Hive Wealth, the app, and the community for just a second.
Absolutely. So with Hive Wealth, we're trying to break through a whole bunch of myths, you know, myths like money is a solitary journey, that you shouldn't talk about it. And ultimately, here's the big secret. Most fundamental money rules and secrets are algorithmic. So at Hive Wealth, we plan on providing that community, the support, the education, but most importantly, all the algorithms you need to run your money and to get as close to market performance for free as possible. And that should really be your goal. And then ultimately to come together to really find fantastic opportunities to invest in the innovation economy. And in that way, with all of those tools, especially together and not alone, we think we can create generational wealth to close the gender, generational, and racial wealth gap.
Fantastic. We have a question from Walton. How do we ensure that the wealth is actually passed down and sustained by those we give it to and leave it for?
That is so important. And that is, please don't leave it to the government to figure out, because you're not going to like their answer. So estate planning is critical. A will is critical, because, you know, it could just so happen to get to the right place and the right people, but why risk it? And then, to be honest, there's also just a lot of tax advantages to philanthropy as well, to serve you even today. So we're going to spend a lot of time on this journey together with Hive Wealth, talking about estate planning, because it's yet another topic. I understand why we don't want to talk about it. It's not the funnest topic in the world, but it's so important to make sure after you do all these things that are right, you check all the boxes, you create all this wealth, you got to make sure it gets to the right place.
Absolutely. And, I just want to give another shout out to Money Matters Show, the show that Yvette and I created. We talk about a lot of these things, estate planning and what to do with your wealth to be able to grow it. So go on to moneymatters.show and subscribe and watch. It's on YouTube. Really fun show. Such fantastic information. Thank you both ladies for sharing. Let's get into some more of the comments and open up our live QA session. So going over to the comments, do we got anything? Michelle Jackson posted the Goal Setter, as mentioned, is a great app for kids and the whole family to get into.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So any other final thoughts from the both of you as we start to wrap this up?
I say to everyone, my biggest thought is to dream big, right? I think you can only be limited by your own dreams, aspirations, and imagination. And also make sure you've got multiple routes to that vision that you have, because I promise you the first one or two are going to have some obstacles, and you need to be able to pivot and figure out how to accomplish your goal. Because if you're passionate about it, it's worth it and it's worthy.
I would say my last thoughts are, and this it's an interesting thing for me to wrestle with actually being in the tech space. As I said before, I just believe that we're at a very interesting time in history where technology, I feel like, has really evened the playing field in a lot of ways for opportunity to find jobs, start a business, use social media apps to become you can become a millionaire off of a social media app. I think there's so much opportunity in tech, but then on the other hand, people's jobs are being automated away because of tech. So it's figure out where you can take advantage of all that's going on in this space, because there are so many small niches that can really change your future. It really did for me. So however you can find people that can help you get into the space, please do so, and just figure out where your lane is and try things out. Like Yvette said, try things out, dream big.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. We're so thrilled to be able to do our first Hive Wealth Live webinar with you. If you have any more questions, visit us at our website. The link is in the comments, and we will see you next time.